Ah, yes. Welcome to spring in North Carolina. We don't get a lot of snow here. What we do get is a nice blizzard of pollen all over everything, including the item in question, 1998 Subaru Legacy Outback. One of my idiot friends has done me the favor of pulling my windshield wipers up. Thank you. But you can see it's absolutely caked. That's not anything wrong with the paint. That's literally just pollen piled onto the car. So, because this is a Subaru wagon and it has this enormous back, I've laid out everything that you should need for the starter job, starting obviously with the starter, metric sockets, pair of gloves, because why not? And then obviously while you're doing the job, you're going to have the battery disconnected for safety reasons, but when it's time to start the car up again, you're going to need to make sure that the battery actually has enough juice to do it, because even if you've put the new starter in, if your battery doesn't have enough volts, in this case 12.4 in this battery, then it won't matter, because you won't have enough crank to get her going. So you either need to have a fully charged battery, or you need to have a way to make sure that the battery is going to have enough juice when you go to start it. And so what I've done, because I tried to start it so many times on the old starter one time, that I actually started to drain the battery, I've got a jumper kit right here, so that when I do go to start it up for the first time, I'm going to hook this up so that the battery will have plenty of juice. So essentially I'll be setting off the new starter and giving it a jump start at the same time, and then once I get it going, I'll take her out for a spin. And then finally, because when I go to install this and take off the other starter, I might need to get a little bit more clearance underneath the car, I've got the scissor jack that comes standard. That should be everything you need. Should be a pretty easy install. Again, this starter comes with all of the nuts and bolts already hooked up, so nothing out of the ordinary. Okay, so here we've got the 2.5 liter Subaru Boxer engine. Now if you own one of these anywhere from 98 to about 2005, 2007, you know that they're notorious for head gasket problems. All of them start to leak oil at some point from one gasket or another. Fortunately, even though this is a 23-year-old car, I only have 96,000 miles on it, so haven't had a head gasket issue yet, although I did have to replace the oil pan gasket, and it does burn some oil around the power steering pump. But so far so good with the head gasket, so hoping that holds out a little while longer. Right back down there you can see my old starter. It's the thing that's all banged up right there. Give you a better view of it through the hoses there. It's the original one. It's still got the Subaru sticker on it, although I've chipped a good bit of that off, hitting it with a tire iron to get it to turn over a few hundred times. Interestingly, unlike a lot of starters on newer cars, this thing kind of just kept going, and I could always get it to start even when it didn't want to at first. I had it like that for months, literally like 2 or 3 months, and just recently it decided to crap out on me, so I was able to get AAA to come out and get it to turn over one last time, and I parked it back here at my apartment and waited for the part to come in. So now that I've got it, I'm hoping I'll be able to get to most of the bolts from the top side. But I guess we'll just see once we get into it. So, I feel like I should have mentioned this before, but just so there's some clarity, I'm not a professional mechanic. I'm just one of those people whose dad is MacGyver and showed me how to do literally everything. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this, that, you know, I'm not certified in anything. I'm just doing it because I know how and hoping I don't screw it up. But so first things first, I disconnected the battery because the ground wire goes straight to the starter, and I don't need to get electrocuted while I'm doing this. So that was pretty simple. It's just two 10mm nuts, and the thing's off. And so now I'll go through and disconnect the other end at the starter, which is literally just a, you know, pull tab type thing, little rubberized hose. And then I'll get in there and start wrenching on the starter itself. Okay, so next step was to disconnect the wire from the battery from that little bolt right there. You can see that one. Not the clearest, there we go. Which was a 12mm socket. There was a bolt and a washer, took them both off. And then you can see right there, connector, I believe that's part of the solenoid, was connected to that little black wire you can see there with the other connector piece, which I'll be honest, doesn't look like it's in the best of shape right at the connection point there. So I hope I don't have to replace that bit, but my new starter should have a new one of those. So we'll just run with that and hope that there's no issue there. But now I'm gonna get in. There's a bolt to take off. Try to get you a better idea of it. So that's the wire from the battery. It wraps around the side and is connected right there. Try to get you a better view of it. Right there, that bolt head right there. So I'm gonna get to that one and then go around the bottom and disconnect it from there. All right, so sit rep. What I've seen people do in the past, and what I actually recommend you probably doing to make it a lot easier on yourself, is removing the air filter and moving all these hoses out of the way, because as you can see, they're pretty much directly in the path of what I'm trying to do here. But I'm just trying to see if I can do it this way. It's definitely harder, but well, we'll see how it goes. But as you can see, I've got, well, if you can see, let's see here, got that bolt right there, that one there, loosened up, but I haven't gotten it all the way out yet. So what I'm gonna do now is go underneath the car and loosen up its sister bolt. They're both 14mm sockets, and those are the only two actually holding the starter motor onto the car. So I'm gonna go underneath and see if I can get that one loose, and then go from there. All right, so small update. That bottom bolt is not a 14. I thought it was, but at least on mine it is definitely not a 14. I'm not sure why. The top one is, so I went back to trying to get that one out, and yeah, it's the longest bolt on planet Earth. It's off, and now I'm gonna try and find which size socket works best on the bottom bolt, which I'll be honest is a little bit of a pain to get to. So I put the car lifted up just a little bit on the scissor jack. Didn't lift the tire all the way off the ground though, because I'm on a bit of a slope. Don't know if you can see that. So I don't want the car to roll backwards. Even though I've got the parking brake on, I'm not entirely secure with the idea of the car rolling off the jack and falling onto me. And B, I really don't need the tire off the ground. I just need to lift this side of the body up, and the suspension gives me the ability to do that without having to take the car too drastically off the ground. So yeah, first bolt off, second one. All right, freeze, stop what you're doing. If you're doing this job, you need to know this because it's important information. So, you know how I said that the bolt on the bottom of the starter wasn't a 14, it's a 17. And that makes it a little bit tricky because the top bolt that you take off for the starter, like I showed you, the top end of the bolt is the one that's facing out here. But on the bottom, it's the threaded end of the bolt, which means that you have to loosen the nut. And if you're using a standard set of sockets like I am, then the end of the nut is going to be too long for this 17 millimeter to handle. The bottom of the nut is gonna, the bottom of the bolt is gonna hit that before you are on enough to be able to actually loosen up the nut. So what you need to do, and what I've done, is you need to get yourself one of these deep socket that can actually go all the way on without any chance of hitting the back. Also, this will give you better leverage because that bolt is tight. Does not want to come off. So that's what I went ahead and did. And what I also did is, as you can see here, I took off the back end of the old starter. This is basically I think this is the solenoid, I'm not entirely sure, but this is the little gear that goes up against the flywheel, gets everything moving. Now what I also did to give myself more room is I loosened and removed the air filter. Not entirely, just as much as possible to give me enough space. And I kind of rested it up against the cylinders like that. It gives me a lot more room. Now, what I said I had seen people do is not only take this off, but also disconnect all these hoses right here. Don't do that. I'll tell you why not to do that, because I did. I loosened this one right here. Yeah, this top one right here. Right there. And I took that off and I started dumping coolant everywhere. As you can see by my nice little stream I've created here of coolant and pollen. And you don't want to do that. So if you can avoid it at all costs, please don't remove these hoses. Just let them be and try to work around them. The reason I took off the back half of the starter, which started right here and went back more that way, is so that it would give me more room to access the bottom nut, because you really don't have any room on the bottom, because there's some more hoses down there that are going to get in your way. Not to mention the dipstick for the transmission fluid runs straight down into your workspace down bottom. So what I've been trying to do for a little while now is actually get it loose from the top, and that didn't work so well with the shorter 3/8 socket, or the 17 millimeter on the 3/8 socket wrench. So what I'm gonna do now is scrap this one and use this one, which is brand new. I got a good feeling about it because these sockets that I'm using right here came from this little metric set that I've also got my screwdrivers in now. And the problem is that the only reason I have this metric set, as you can see it's very old, is because it's the same set that my grandfather used to work on his old Volkswagen Beetle back in the 70s. Needless to say, these aren't in the best shape anymore. So I'm hoping that not only will this be better because it's newer, well, brand new, hasn't been used at all, so it should have really good grip, but also because it is the deep well socket, and so it should be able to grab onto the bolt really well without any issues, and hopefully I'll have enough leverage to get it off of there. But if I don't, then I'll let you know what I do instead, because one way or another that thing's coming off of there, and I will impart that information onto you. Alright, so I've skipped a little bit but I'll fill you in on what I did. This is pretty straightforward. That bottom bolt was giving me a lot of issues, but eventually I got it out. And from there, things are pretty straightforward because you use the same nut for the bottom and the same bolt for the top, and you just go back and reattach everything that you had to detach. Really the hardest part is getting the starter off. The old starter. Once you get the old starter off, the new starter takes 5 minutes to put on. And then you just make sure not to forget, put anything back on, reconnect the battery the way it should be. Like the air filter too, any hoses that you had to move in the process. The wiring that runs from the battery to the starter itself, make sure you hook that up after you reconnect this wire right here that runs to the starter. I'll give you a better view of it. That right there, that metal piece that I was talking about earlier, reconnect that first. Obviously you'd have to, because it goes on the bolt, that one of the 2 bolts that holds the starter to the engine. But also accidentally tried to well, I forgot to put that back on when I rebolted it, and so then when I put that back on, and then I realized I'd forgotten it, so I had to take that back off and then put that back on and then put that back on. So yeah, that just took out a little extra time. I did a dumb. But yeah. So, and again, make sure that you've actually got enough charge in it so that it'll turn over, assuming you've done the job right in the first place. And then before you try to start the car, lower it back down, like I have. Don't start a car that's lifted. Usually doesn't end well, but so now, as you can see, the lights on the dash are pretty strong, so you can tell I've got battery. And yeah, we'll see how this goes. Time to find out if we've brought this baby back to life. Yes. AC just kicked in. That's what that sound was. Turn that off so I'm not giving it too much stress. Now, one thing that I did when I was doing this job is I accidentally lost a little bit of coolant, so I'll have to go out and buy some more, but I have brought it back to life.